Holly.
BBC Radio Solent.
With Sam Fraser.
Yes, good afternoon, lovely people of the South. It's me, Sam Fraser, in for Alex Dyke with the Wall of Sound for this Monday afternoon here on BBC Radio Solent. And coming up shortly, singer, painter and psychedelic Superman Henry Turtle joins me in the studio. BBC Radio Solent, the Pointer Sisters. I'm so excited. Well, I'm so excited. And you'll forgive me because I've got a very special human being in the studio with me. 60s aficionados may know the name Henry Turtle. He sang with his band The Doves, but he hung around with all sorts. The Yardbirds, the Stones, Eric Clapton, Jeff Beck, you name them. He's met them all. And I'm very pleased to say he's still making music and he joins me in the studio this afternoon. Henry, lovely to have you with us here on BBC Radio Solent.
Gosh, what a lovely introduction. Thank you so much, Sam. It's lovely to be here. Of course it's lovely to be here.
Well, I have to say, that's not my favourite bit about your biography, because I'm reading your biography, which anybody can check out online. It's henryturtle.co.uk. And it says here, Christine Eiley in the Sunday Times described you as a cross between a rumour and a chansonnier. How lovely.
Yes, that's rather good, isn't it? She did indeed. The thing is that they wanted us to do this interview, and we didn't want to do it. I mean, we weren't interested in. And if it looks, she said had a track out called Carnival of Light, which was all about something. You know, in those days we didn't have the communication that we have now, and I saw that the Beatles had recorded this thing called Carnival of Light, and nobody knew where it was. So it got my imagination going, and we ended up on telly dressed as Sergeant Pepper gear, but in shorts. And she thought that was rather wonderful, but we didn't really want to be. We were rather silly then, you know. We didn't want to be in the papers and things. We just wanted to.
You were undermining it, subverting it even then. Silly. But I just loved that description between a rumour and a chansonnier. I wonder how she'd describe me. Probably between a rumour and a bad reputation, I suspect. But I think you're a man after my own heart, because you have had a very interesting career in music, but kind of at the periphery. As you were saying, you made a choice to be sort of sitting on the edge. Tell me, first of all, how did you come to be in music at all?
Oh, my giddy aunt. Well, at school, and I'm not name-dropping, it's fact, I was from about 5 onwards, my best mate was a guy called Jeff Beck.
No, say not so.
And he came into school one day with a guitar, and I just, wow. And in the lunch break, we'd sit there and he'd say, this is A. This is chord A. And I'd go home and he'd let me have the guitar and I'd learn A. But the big event came when we heard there was a guy in Kingston. So it was on our treaders, our push bikes, and off we went because he knew the hand movement signal for B7. And that we had the lot. We had E, A, B, 7, and
your musical career was born.
And then Jimmy Page arrived at Sutton and Cheam School of Art, and we all looked terribly scruffy and awful. But the big event, Sam, was on Sundays we'd go to Richmond, and there would be like-minded people. But Eric Clapton used to be at the Alberge Coffee Lounge before he learnt to play guitar also. So did Julie Christie before she was in movies. So did Paul Jones, who I know is well known here, before he even played harmonica, I suspect. But the big attraction was the Swedish au pairs who would be there. and we'd all be dressed up, you know, with 5 Park Drive tipped fags between us. And then in the evening, we poodle off down to the Station Hotel. And the first time I walked in there, a girl ran past me and went up to the barman and said, "Can I have a pint of water, please?" And he said, "There you are, my dear." And she tipped it over her head and back into the throng of dancers because the Rolling Stones were playing there. So I mentioned this to Oliver, my son, who's more into making movies, but he's the best producer, honestly, music producer, as you'll hear, I hope, when you play this track. He played everything on it, and we recorded it in our kitchen. And I was sitting on the Arga while my wife did the vocal, the Swedish au pair girl part, and I did the vocal in the loo. And the production on it, he didn't just do it. He was at university in London doing English Lit at the time, but he researched the whole Stone sound, and it was something I'd always wanted to do. do. So I wrote it, and he said, there you are, Father. I was in corporate life here now, working at Port Solent there with ADT. And he put a microphone before we had a very important meeting, and I did the vocal like that in one. And I came back, and he presented me with this finished... it's just incredible. It's just like 4 minutes, just under 4 minutes, that captures that time before the Rolling Stones were big. But if they were on in town tonight, we used to go and watch them at El Pie and at the Station Hotel, and they'd do the Wooden Bridge at Guildford. And we'd be there because it was like-minded. In those days, you either carried on and went to university, which we did.
Where did you go?
I was at Central School of Art and Craft, but
we'll talk about that in a little bit.
That came under university. They got a university grant from Surrey County Council. It was wonderful. And
those were the days.
That's when Jeff joined the Yardbirds, and I used to dep for their singer because he had asthma in one lung, and nobody knew. This is Keith Ralph, isn't he? Yeah.
He used to be the body double.
Yeah, I was the body double. I was talking to your producer, and I was saying about Totten. I remember we turned up there to do something. Keith would still do the television and the interviews, but if it was anything arduous, his dad Bill would come round for me with a fag in his mouth and drive me up to Liverpool, and he'd still have the same fag in his mouth. That's just before motorways. Wonderful days. And then, of course, I landed up with the guys at Surrey Sound Studio. I got signed by George Martin to air before that, when the Beatles split.
This is a whole mashup of exciting stories here, Henry, but I'm just going to separate them out a little bit. So I'm looking at the single that you're talking about, which is called The Rolling Stones Are in Town Tonight. This is the one that your son Oliver has produced.
And played everything on.
And played everything on. Goodness gracious me. Well, we shall have a listen to this very shortly. But this is the song that captures something of that experience that you enjoyed back in the 60s.
Oh, it was heaven.
Well, let's have a listen. Let's have a listen and see what we make of it.
Spring, live my life, never worry about a
BBC Radio Solent. That's The Rolling Stones Are in Town Tonight from Henry Turtle, who joins me in the studio this afternoon. Me, Sam Fraser, in for Alex Dyke, and I'm so excited. That's such a wonderful sound, Henry. It's so evocative. It's got that lovely driving bass that the Stones were kind of was a big part of their sound. And Oliver, your son, is here, and you produced this, Oliver.
Yes.
How did the project come together?
They come together. Well, my dad sort of had the rough idea of the song, the lyrics, and would sort of perch on the corner of the sofa and he would serenade me with the rough skeleton of the track. And then I sort of took it away and we put together this montage of different Rolling Stones songs, like got a bit of a last time at the beginning there and the harmonica from Come On. And
you were playing the harmonica, Henry,
yes,
yourself.
That's about all. Ollie played every instrument on there.
Oliver, this is a huge feat. And, of course, your mum was on it as well, wasn't it? Tina?
Yes, so she's playing the role of the Swedish au pair. So you sort of heard her into, I think, also some backing vocals as well. So, yeah, there was everyone but the cat. We couldn't quite crowbar him into that. Side. But yes,
well, it's absolutely joyful. And as you were saying, it's a real family affair. And you were saying some people go to the football, other people go to the pub, and you clearly and your dad get together and make music. And it's a joyful track. I love it. And it's got all that psychedelic stuff going on, Henry.
Well, what's interesting about that was that Oliver recorded it in the kitchen, and I did the vocals in the loo. And I don't know where Tina Turtle came in, because I came home and she'd done it. I just can't imagine her doing that sort of thing, nor could she. She sort of raised her hand in horror when we mentioned that she's going to be a pop star or something, because she's very corporate, very pop. Tina Turtle, she's got the right name, hasn't she?
She certainly has. Tina Turtle, I love it. Where does the name Turtle come from? You're not from the Galapagos Islands.
Oliver might be able to enlighten you a tad on that.
It's very mysterious, because my grandfather is from Belfast, and turtle doesn't sound particularly Irish, but I think maybe it's from turtle dove, because I think turtle would be used instead of dove in the Shakespearean time, but it's still quite mysterious. We're not quite sure.
I love the idea of having some mystery about it. And of course you were with the Doves. That was your band.
Oh God, yes, I forgot about that. Well, when you asked me about why I recorded this and the Doves had sort of all sorts of... There was a band called The Herd, and we were really going to be The Herd, but then something happened and we just became The Doves. And that was a really great band, because Harvey the lead guitarist, went on to play with Hot Chocolate, and he's still with them. Mick Underwood, he's been in lots of bands, really big bands like Gillan and all those, the drummer. And we were just sort of a very pretty band, because that was important.
Well, you were pretty.
But the lovely thing was that if I could just go back a little bit, I've got a great story, if I may tell you, about how I fronted the Rolling Stones.
Tell me.
Well, my parents were in the RAF, Olive, and when I used to come home with that, see, Jeff Beck would have the guitar one day, and I'd have it the next.
It was a kind of timeshare guitar.
Yeah, it wasn't a very good one. I'd come home with it on my bike, and then I'd have to take it back to art school the next day. But I was learning, and I also played harmonica. But my parents were horrified by this, and so I found myself in 1962, the coldest ever winter in history, in Millet's shop doorway, practicing. Coming down the high street, two girls said to me, "Henry, there's a band out the back there. They're not very good, but there's a guy playing a harmonica through a microphone." So I was in there. I shot up the back of the Red Lion in Sutton, and there was an old Sunday school chum from St Andrew's Church in Cheam Village, Stu, playing piano. The band were having a break. I said, "Stu, can I have a go on the microphone?" He said, "Yeah, sure, Henry. I'll play along with you." Well, the band came back from their break and played along with me. I sung, and one played harmonica. There's only three of them. And it was brilliant. Went back next week with loads of mates, and the same thing happened. But and I forgot all about it. They weren't there the next week. This was in December 1962. And in corporate life, I decided to collect all their singles on 45, the Decca ones. And I had the whole lot, and the EPs and the albums. I was one short, Street Fighting Man on 45. And I was with Oliver in the car, and this chap in West Wickham of all, he said, Henry, I've got it, £30. I shot up there, and we bought it. And on the way home, Ollie said, Dad, you didn't really thank him enough. I said, well, I gave him £30. So he said, give him a phone. So we had a hands-free. Ollie dialed it, and I said, thank you. So he said, Henry, I didn't know you fronted the Rolling Stones. I said, well, nor did I. Nor did I, dear boy. I used to go and watch them before they were famous, and we were all like-minded and looked the same. We were all poor. He said, well, you did. And if you ring this, there was a guy in the shop when you came in, and he's got the big C, and he's a bit down. Give him a ring. He didn't recognise you now, obviously. So I rang him up, and he said, you know Pete Moody? I said, yeah, there was the Yardbirds, the Stones, the Authentics, who I was in. That's what we used to always play with the Yardbirds. If the other guy was ill, I'd jump in. And the Grebels, and he was in the Grebels. He's a bass player. And he said, Henry, I said, I didn't front the stage. He said, you did. Do you remember that night in the Red Lion pub in Sutton? That was the Rolling Stones before Bill and Charlie joined, because they didn't have a bass player or a drummer. So I bought Bill Wyman's book, Stone Alone. It's a great read. And sure enough, in the back was all the gigs, and they played the Red Lion in December for 2 dates in 1962, and I fronted them.
Oh, darling, that's a lovely story. Now, I'm going to play another track. This time, we're going to hear from your Cover Shots album. We're going to hear Pretty Flamingo. Just quickly, just tell me, when did you record this?
Well, when I was working, some friends of mine and we built a recording studio in Leatherhead, Surrey, above the dairy. And one of the first bands in was Police, and we recorded their first 2 albums, and then because of the success of that, we had Susie and the Banshees, Hazel O'Connor, the Lotus Eaters, Robert Smith. I used to drive him there. He was in Susie and the Banshees for a bit then, and Paul Thompson. And then I went on to Eden Studios, where we worked with everybody, from Dylan to Cliff to the Sex Pistols. That was a story indeed, and all those sorts of bands. So I was able to I had sort of chums I'd built up, and I was very friendly with Paul Thompson from The Cure, and very friendly with Rod Diath, who was a marvellous drummer in Rory Gallagher's band in their heyday, Chris Glenn, who lives around here, who was in Alex Harvey, and myself on vocal and harmonica. And we were working in Worthing because Rod Diath, when he left Rory Gallagher, bought a studio. So we all got together for a bit of a whoop-up, and this came out of it. I just played harp. Paul started playing guitar, the guy from The Cure, and I started playing harmonica, and then I started singing it, and this came out of it. So this is coming out next month.
Well, your harmonica has obviously taken you great places, Henry, and let's have a listen to this from your whoop-up.
If he just could. Oh, some sweet day, I'll make her mine, pretty flamingo. And if where I'll be. Sha-la-la, pretty flamingo. Sha-la-la, pretty flamingo.
That's Henry Turtle and Pretty Flamingo. We'll be talking to Henry shortly after this. Solent, and I am joined in the studio by the very lovely Henry Turtle and producer son Oliver. We've been talking about the music that you've been making, Henry, all the way through from the 60s to right up to now, because that's the single that we heard earlier is going to be released. When is that?
No, Saturday. Friday.
This Friday coming.
Yes.
So, and where will people be able to buy that?
Well, Oliver, you can explain it on.
But we have it on iTunes.
Okay, so just go to iTunes, search Henry Turtle,
and Facebook and all those
plethora
things.
of wonderful things will pop up. Now, we were talking off air about your time at art school, because you were at Central, weren't you?
Yes, I was.
And your best friend was another very famous person. Tell us about Viv Stanshall.
Oh, my giddy aunt. Well, you've got to remember, this was in the days of Ready, Steady, Go. That was a TV show.
I don't remember it myself, but I've seen footage.
Here, and that was down the road. Mick Jagger was at London School of Economics. The Pretty Things came out of Central. That was my year. The original Pretty Things, still a fabulous band. Anyway, I went up there all sort of just about 18, and I got into university. I was absolutely thrilled. I was all very fresh-faced and smart, and I arrived at Central and sat next to there was this chap, and he had a three-piece ginger suit on, and he was very large with a ginger crew cut and little glasses, and he said, "Henry, I'm pleased to meet you." He said, "Have you got any money?" And I said, "Well, I've got a few bob." He said, "Well, let's go out and have a beer." And I didn't drink. "I've got to meet this Johnny from the BBC." So I said, "Well, surely we've got to start, working. I want to do some painting." And he said, "No, let's go down the Cheshire Cheese," which was in Leicester Square. So he went into the Cheshire Cheese and he got a couple of bob off me. He went up to the bar and he said, "I'll have a jacket potato with beans and cheese and a pint of real ale, please." And I could only afford a glass of water. He nicked all my dosh. So we sat down, and these American people sat near us. They're obviously tourists, there were about 5 of them. And he went up to Viv and he said, what do you have here in England?" He said, "Well, what have you?" He said, "Well, I've ordered, this, that, and the other." And so they went up the bar and he ordered 5 jacket potatoes and pints of real ale. And when they arrived, they just sat and looked at them. And I knew this Viv was up to something, because he looked down at all these American people, who are lovely people, and they didn't know how to eat this jacket potato. So Viv picked up the jacket potato and dipped it in his beer. And they all proceeded to follow him. And that's just what he was like. He was absolutely... He was
bonkers.
A bit of a worry. Yes, but he was great fun.
And he was your best friend? Was that throughout the time that you were there?
Well, he was my best friend for about a year. And then there was this lovely girl who we used to do life drawing. And there was this delicious woman. And I was very young and very beautiful.
Well, you were. I'm just looking at you on your biography. Beautiful cheekbones,
she must have been... I found myself sitting opposite her on the tube, and Viv was obviously had a keen... Because he was friends with Keith Moon, of course. And we'd be doing life drawing, and the door would burst open, and Keith Moon would say, Viv, I've got one." He says, "Tea bag, Mr. Tea Bag." And they had this thing going, and we do it driving on a long trip, And I got off with this model, and he didn't speak to me much after that. He had the hump, which I must agree I was really pleased about. That was Viv. And the only other madman I met was the Sex Pistols mob, because when I finished at Surrey Sound, I didn't finish. I got offered a better job at Eden Studios in Chiswick, and that's where they recorded all the top artists. Like, first day I walked in, there was Phil Everly, of the Everly Brothers, and then the next day it would be Dire Straits and Duran Duran, Shakin' Stevens, all this stuff, and the phone would go, and it would be, "Hello, EMI here, we want to book a band for 3 days." And I'd say, "Yes, lovely," and I'd fill in this form, and I'd say, "Well, who is it?" And they went, "We'll get back to you on that." So I'd say, okay, well, I did. Anyway, I was up in the office there, and we had the first Total Recall desk, because in the Surrey Sound days you strip the desk for the next artist coming in.
Yeah.
But at Eden it was all there, ready for you, how you left it. Marvellous. Anyway, there was this crashing and banging, and the owner of the studio was called Piers Ford Crush. And he was just what he sounds like. He's marvellous, rotund gentleman, again in a big suit. But it's his studio, and with a guy called Philip Love, who was an accountant type, really nice guy. And we all rushed down to the studio, and there were the Sex Pistols, as known, and they were crashing and jumping about on this beautiful grand piano we had. And Piers went up to Rotten and got hold of him and pushed him against the wall and said, "Now look here, dear boy," he said, "this piano is mine. I bought it." He said, "You're not with a big corporate now. Now you just behave yourself." And they did.
Oh, bless
But
them.
they never played on any of their records. That was the amazing thing. There'd be Chris Spedding playing the guitar on Pretty Vacant, and I'd be there, working on the... And they were
I'm
just...
surprised you didn't get your harmonica out, Henry.
Well, if I could have crept it in, it generally creeps in somewhere. I played so many sessions on harmonicas, but it's just something that I just find amusing.
Well,
It's
it
just
sounds
silly,
so much
isn't
fun.
it?
I have to say, when we were playing your Pretty Flamingo version, I did feel there's a little bit of Sex Pistols influence in there.
Well, maybe it was, but it was just, well, you've got Paul Thompson there from Cure playing guitar. I mean, they're sort of out of that bag, aren't they? Whereas Rod is probably the best drummer I've ever come across, and Chris Glenn, with Alex Harvey, and he was with the Blockheads, of course, before that. We just went with the flow. It just came out like that. And on the end, there were those girls. We dragged them out the pub. I said, "Could you sing Pretty Flamingo?" And they said, "Flamdingo." What? And they couldn't even say flamingo, but it's great. Yeah, I suppose it was rather that sort of thing.
I have to say, I think this music is absolutely joyful. Tell me about, finally, aspirations. You've done everything, and you've met everybody there is to meet. You've looked beautiful, and I know you're still painting and you're still making music. Plans now for the next 5 years?
Well, a lady stopped me the other day and she said, "What do you do?" And I said, "What do I do? I'm on holiday." She said, "No, but what do you do?" I said, "I intend to be on holiday for the rest of my life, dear, because I live in a beautiful... I have my cornflakes every morning looking out at the sea, for God's sake. A bit of grass, then I've got the beach." Oliver and his mother were driving along, pedalling along the beach last night late. We're just happy as a family. We don't see Ollie much because he works at the Barbican now, but he produces things like what you're about to play. He even recorded the cat before he died when he was snoring.
Oh, so tell me a little bit about this this final. Oliver, this is the cat George. Now tell me about this song, which is essentially a tribute to a cat that you once owned.
Yes, so we had a lovely three-legged cat called George. It was very peaceful, and I think my dad wrote the song almost out of envy for his languorous lifestyle while he was sort of driving around all of England. And sadly, he was quite old, but he died. And I think the sort of song took a different turn after that. So it was sort of died halfway through writing the song. So it's become something of a eulogy, but it is still quite... Yes, there's this tone of wishing you had the lifestyle of the cat. And
well, don't we all wish we had the life? I've got 3 cats, so I'm very tuned in to the lifestyle of a cat, and it looks most attractive. So, Oliver, this song is called...
Well, I'd like it to be called My Cat George, but my dad's going for the Sleeping in the Sunshine.
Well, let's see.
Take your pick.
Okay.
George! Georgie! Din-dins!
Walking through a perfume garden, here comes my cat George, busy watching the flowers grow.
summertime just drifting by.
There you are, Sleeping in the Sunshine, a tribute to George the cat, the pet of our guest earlier this afternoon, Henry Turtle. Marvellous raconteur and not short of a story or two, was he? You can find out more about Henry by logging on at henryturtle.co.uk. An extraordinary life and still making music and still painting. Marvellous stuff here on BBC Radio Solent.
Rio 2016, the Olympic Games.
An astonishing moment! Adam Peaty's won gold! A game changer for British swimming and British sport!
Tonight, the inaugural Women's Rugby Sevens final and Tom Daley in the men's 10-metre synchro diving.
Everybody in the stadium is up on their feet! It's a new world record!
The greatest show on earth. Live on BBC TV, Radio 5 Live and the BBC Sport website and app.